The content of this podcast has not been evaluated by Health Canada or the FDA. It is educational in nature and should not be taken as medical advice. Always consult a qualified medical professional to see if a diet, lifestyle change, or supplement is right for you. Any supplements mentioned are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Please note that the opinions of the guests or hosts are their own and may not reflect those of Advanced Orthomolecular Research Incorporated. Welcome to Supplementing Health, a podcast presented by Advanced Orthomolecular Research. We are all about applying evidence-based and effective dietary, lifestyle, and natural health product strategies for your optimal health. In each episode, we will feature very engaging clinicians and experts from the world of functional and naturopathic medicine to help achieve our mission to empower people to live their best lives naturally. Welcome to Supplementing Health. Today I'm joined by Dr. Sophie Macleod, naturopathic doctor, an outgoing, energetic, and hardworking individual with extensive experience in education and health and fitness industry. Her passion for health was ignited from a young age when she was only 18 years old, and she became a certified personal trainer. She continued to pursue her passion for health by completing her degree in human kinetics and a doctorate in naturopathic medicine. She has become a certified sports nutritionist, and she's here to share her expertise in using nutrition and exercise to gain weight and muscle mass, particularly for young athletes and menopausal women. Welcome, Sophie. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
So before we kind of dive into the topic, I'd love to know what really gave you this passion that you followed throughout your career?
Yeah, absolutely. The passion for naturopathic medicine, health, and fitness kind of just all came intrinsically from within, throughout my whole life. So it's something that I kind of followed my interests and followed my curiosity, right? I just always wanted to learn more, and that eagerness to learn turned into education, and that education turned into a career. It really came down to also how I was brought up with my family, my sister's a naturopathic doctor, my father's a clinical pharmacist. So I always kind of had those influences in my life that kind of landed me where I am today.
That's awesome. And so then we know that obesity has become an epidemic and it's detrimental to long-term good health. So most often when we're talking about weight management, it's thought of as being synonymous with weight loss. However, that isn't always the case. So how often do you see clients looking to gain weight or increase muscle mass rather than lose weight?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so happy that we are talking about this, topic in this discussion today, just because it really is kind of pushed under the rug because there is such an emphasis on weight loss as opposed to weight gain. And it's definitely not something I've ever actually, it very, very seldom people will come to me asking for help with gaining weight. So it's something that I actually bring up with my patients. So there's certain populations in particular that, I emphasize this in our treatment protocols, right? So age-related sarcopenia or muscle loss is huge. So we see that, right? Like you mentioned, postmenopausal, we see declines in muscle mass. Those at risk of osteoporosis or that have osteopenia, anyone who is also a cancer patient or going through treatments, we want to maintain their muscle mass. We want to help them maintain their weight. That's very important as well. Someone that has a history of eating disorders, right? We have to have these discussions around how to maintain weight or do that in a healthy manner, right? Chronic disease, there's a lot of different factors and a lot of different populations, athletes, like you said, that could really use help and guidance in this area. And it's really hard to find, healthcare providers that can actually support them in that.
So when you are working with these different kind of patients, do your recommendations for them as far as diet and nutrition go vary depending on which of those kind of motivators or conditions they come to you with?
Absolutely. So, it's one piece of the kind of the big puzzle in terms of, what their treatment protocols is, whether we're working on gut health or hormones or mental health, right? But then on the side, I'll say we also need to work on helping you to increase your muscle mass, right? We know that, we want to do this work preventatively, right? So I don't want to see someone come into my office that has osteoporosis or is just found out from their doctor that their bone scan just came back and their results were not good. I want to have this discussion with patients now so that we are preventing that from happening in the future, right? So it's a big part of it is education, I find. So, it's education on the importance of, maintaining muscle mass, the importance of, what the risk factors are when we see muscle mass decline later in life. And so it comes down to that education piece first before we start implementing the treatment protocols.
So I think because of the diet culture that most of us are used to, calories are kind of thought of as the main thing to focus on. And so in theory, more calories would mean more weight, but it's really not that simple when it comes to putting on healthy weight, is it?
Yeah, it's a good question because there's a huge anti-diet movement. There's a huge kind of momentum in the way that we don't want to think about the diet as just calories. You want to think about, what we're actually consuming and, the macronutrients and the what types of food we're actually, putting into our body, which is very, very important. Now, when we think about putting on weight or adding muscle mass, calories are very, very important. It is a huge part of the conversation. And right now, what we're seeing is the majority of people right now who are trying to lose weight are putting themselves either in a pretty significant caloric deficit, right? They're decreasing their calories significantly, or they're fasting. I've had people come in, fasting for very long periods of time. And what they have to understand is that when you're fasting, when you're in a negative caloric balance, if you're not doing it properly, you will be in what's known as a negative nitrogen balance. So essentially, your body is going to start pulling from the muscle and actually breaking down the muscle to retrieve those essential amino acids that we're not getting from consuming our food because we're not eating enough. Okay, so that's a huge aspect of the caloric picture. Is one, okay, how much protein are you getting in that time that you're eating, and is it enough? Back to the calories, when someone is trying to put on weight or someone is struggling to put on weight, let's say 60-year-old postmenopausal woman with a history of fractures, who is kind of teetering on that osteopenia, osteoporosis, and struggling to get enough food in, right? Just struggling to eat enough. And that is a huge, huge obstacle when it comes to increasing our muscle weight and muscle mass, because everyone has a lot of fears around food and types of food and what they should be eating. But ultimately, if we're trying to put on muscle weight and we're trying to add like muscle and gain weight, you have to be eating enough, right? So usually that looks like a, 200 to 400 kilocalorie increase daily to be able to see increases in your weight or muscle mass.
Okay, interesting. And so how much of that like 200 to 400 calorie increase should be coming from increased protein intake?
Yeah, so I would look at it less from the 200 to 400 calorie increase and more look at it as the daily picture. And we can talk about protein kind of in its own, but yeah, those calories would just be just any calories essentially, just to make sure you're eating enough. And then we can talk about that protein, because the protein, when we look at the requirements, will depend on the entire day and what you're consuming throughout your day.
Okay, so then in overall, is there like a specific percentage that you want from protein if you're trying to increase muscle mass, or would that percentage stay the same regardless of kind of what your body composition goals are?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into protein, because this is one of the biggest factors that we see for someone not being able to put on muscle mass or not being able to increase their weight. So when we look at what the protein requirements are, our daily protein requirements, we always look above and beyond the RDA. So the RDA in Canada is 0.8 grams per kilogram, and kind of time and time again, we see that that does not work for the entire population. Definitely not anyone who is starting to see decline in their muscle mass, who is predisposed to any chronic illness, fatigue, athletes. It's just not enough. So what I do in my practice is I use a reference range, and the number value for the grams per kilogram that I give to a patient will depend on where they're at. So it's a lot more individualized. So I'll take an inventory of their diet. And so let's say this 60-year-old woman that I was talking to you about. So let's say she weighs 150, she probably weighs maybe 120 pounds. Okay. So that weight right there is around 55 kilos or 55 kilograms. Okay. So if I say to her, you have to get 1 gram per kilogram of body weight per day, that's 55 grams. And to some people, that might be okay, right? That might be, maybe she's already getting more than that. But to some people, that might be like, oh, wow, like they were only getting like 30 grams per day, depending on how much they're eating. So first we have to look at actually how much protein they're eating and how we can start increasing that. Because although we have these numbers and these goals, which is great, it's unrealistic to say someone who's only eating 30 grams per day to go to like 120. Okay. So the range will depend on their body weight first. So it's grams per kilogram. And the range that I always go with is minimum, I would say 1.3 to 2.2 grams per kilogram. So that's why I use kind of a larger range, because it depends on what the baseline of their diet is, what they're actually able to consume throughout the day. And then it depends on what their goals are. So more of like an athlete bodybuilding, I'd be on that higher end of the range, versus someone that I'm just trying to get to consume more calories. I'd probably put them at more of like a 1.5 grams per kilogram of protein per day.
And does it make a difference if it comes from vegetarian sources versus animal sources?
Yes, it does. So the animal sources are a little bit easier to digest and absorb. Plant proteins can have some difficulty with absorption, but with plant proteins, you get a lot more fiber. So you get a lot more of those benefits of having more plant fibers and legumes and all those great things. However, the animal protein has a different amino acid profile, so it's a little bit more of that protein digestibility. So a mix is great. If you're vegetarian or vegan, we can chat about, and I'll discuss the importance of leucine, the amino acid that is most known for stimulating muscle protein synthesis, right? So a variation is great. It's always good to consume more plant proteins in your diet, absolutely. But if you're consuming animal products and meats as well, I think that's a great way of supplementing your diet.
So if you are in a calorie deficit, does supplementing with protein or BCAAs help to prevent that nitrogen deficient state you were discussing?
Yeah, so anyone could benefit from utilizing a protein supplement. Most people aren't getting or hitting that value, the above the RDA, the 1.5 grams to 2.2 grams per kilogram that I was discussing. A lot of people don't know what their average protein intake is throughout the day. So using a protein supplement absolutely is helpful for that. And we can go through which protein supplements exactly, because it has the same question you asked before, right? The animal versus the plant proteins. So a whey protein, a casein protein, or like a paleo protein, the amino acid profile in those proteins is different from a pea or a brown rice or a hemp seed protein. So that's the reason why when they've done the research in what protein is best for stimulating muscle protein synthesis, what protein is best for helping someone to increase their muscle size in response to exercise, well, whey protein is always king. Whey protein has always beat the other proteins, way better than soy, way better than brown rice. And why is that? It's because it has a high leucine content. Okay, you do not need to supplement with BCAAs to see an increase in your muscle protein synthesis. So people still will buy BCAAs all the time, but it's not necessary if you're taking a protein supplement like a whey protein or a casein protein. If you're going to use a vegetarian or a vegan protein, like a brown rice protein, I always look at the amino acid profile. So look at the amino acid profile, take out your protein that you have at home, take it out of the shelf, look at the back of it, and look at how many grams of leucine are in it. Okay. If it doesn't have at least 2 grams of leucine per scoop, then you could consider using a BCA. Then you could consider maybe adding in leucine on top of that to help stimulate that muscle protein synthesis. But otherwise, all the research on BCAs is not very supportive for the use in humans to increase muscle protein synthesis. The results and data is pretty negligible. So if you're going to make a choice to what to spend your money on, definitely spend it on a protein.
Okay, that makes sense. And so another kind of, I guess, fad or popular diet right now is going keto, and especially for weight loss. How does that affect, and those fats affect weight gain?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a little bit of a different topic because that's more of like rebound weight gain, because what happens is when you put your body in such a negative caloric balance, right? So you lose weight rapidly, you're declining all that muscle glycogen, you start to lose weight. Your basal metabolic rate, or the BMR, your daily energy expenditure, starts to decline in response to that decreased caloric intake. So what's going to happen is that rebound weight gain is going to come once you start consuming more calories. Your body's going to start putting into storage. So less about how we can add it in, and more for just kind of like what the response is. So I would say if someone's trying to gain weight, definitely avoid any of those types of diets. It really just comes down to the macronutrients and protein intake, and additional other supplements to help increase that muscle protein synthesis.
So what other supplements would you consider for someone who is trying to gain that weight beyond the protein supplement?
Yeah, absolutely. So creatine monohydrate would definitely be my number one. I use it a lot in my practice. It's one of those supplements that unfortunately has been, disregarded as just being a supplement for, people who are, working out 6 times a week and lifting weights. Yes, absolutely, they should be taking them. But I'm talking about using creatine in postmenopausal women, women with osteoporosis, anyone with age-related sarcopenia, cancer, those sorts of things. Absolutely. Creatine monohydrate has so much research, so much evidence to support its increase in muscle protein synthesis, as well as increasing performance, right? So it helps to build muscle, and it helps you to actually feel better. There's research on cognitive health too. So all around, it's a great supplement, as well as the safety of it. The safety profile is great. So they are using it in older populations, younger populations. The one risk is in kind of extreme kidney failure, whereas so you want to be monitoring kidney function if you're in a population that has kidney disease. But otherwise, the safety is great. It's pretty inexpensive. It's easy to take, right? You take 5 grams per day. It's you can see really great results with that. And I have a lot of postmenopausal women who are not only, not just trying to gain weight, sometimes for weight loss protocols, because I want them to put on muscle too, and not lose muscle if they're trying to lose weight. So it goes hand in hand for both of those.
Okay, interesting. And do you use timed nutrition at all with your clients?
Absolutely. So I did a specific podcast on this previously. We are talking about specifically how I use sports nutrition in my practice. So sports nutrition is all about the 3 T's, which is essentially the type of food that you're consuming, the total energy intake, or the calories, and the timing. So when you're consuming those calories as well. When it comes to weight gain and putting on muscle mass, the timing is going to be eat as much and as frequently as possible in the simplest terms. Because a lot of people think if they want to gain muscle, then they just are going to eat a huge meal right after they do a workout, right? But all of the research now is supporting actually spreading your protein intake and spreading energy intake throughout the day. So the value that I gave for my daily protein intake was around 1.5 grams per kilogram of body weight to 2.2 grams per kilogram per day, right? Just to give patients a target of what they can calculate. But I actually always provide a protein target per meal as well. And this really helps with the timing and the frequency as well. So usually that value is going to be between 0.2 to 0.5 grams per kilogram. Once again, when we look at a value like that, it always depends on the person. It always depends on the goals, right? We can start low, but on average, that would equal 20 to 25 grams of protein per meal. Okay, so if you're exercising after work at 5 p.m. and you're like, okay, well, I'll just have my protein shake after my workout. Well, it actually matters what you had for breakfast that day. It matters what you had for lunch that day. It matters what you had before and after, right? So you have to look at that full big picture. And that's a huge component of sports nutrition is timing out your meals, especially for recovery to help make sure you're stimulating that muscle growth after you exercise.
Awesome. And so, do you think exercise and nutrition are equal when it comes to this weight gain, or is diet more like, should we favor diet over exercise?
Yeah, so it's definitely not a one or the other. If someone is trying to gain weight, the energy intake would definitely, win over the expenditure, obviously, because we want to get those calories in. But the exercise component is really important too. A lot of people totally disregard the fact that we do need to be doing weight-bearing activity in order to stimulate muscle growth, right? In order to build muscle, you need to be doing weight-bearing activity. So strength training is a huge component of my protocols, and that's from my background in kinesiology. And as a trainer, I can actually prescribe specific exercises based on, what we're looking to do, whether I have a patient who is, prone to falls or is at risk of fractures. Well, we need to, strengthen their balance and strengthen their glutes and those sorts of things. So that's the strength component of it. But you need to have both. And I explain this to my patients that you need to have that external and internal influence on that muscle growth, right? You need to be doing the training that's going to help stimulate the muscle. And then you also need to be eating properly to help build that muscle.
And how does sleep and recovery play into this? Because obviously when you're a high-end athlete or any athlete and you're putting a lot of energy expenditure, your body naturally needs that time to recover. But if it's more around that dietary portion, is there still the same need for sleep and recovery that there is if you are trying to lose weight?
Absolutely. There's probably even more of an emphasis on that if someone's trying to build muscle to get enough sleep. So what happens and how I explain it is when you're sleeping, your body is finally in this anabolic state. It finally has the opportunity to actually build as opposed to break down. So that's why it's so important. That's especially in our young athletes. That's when they're secreting all the growth hormone, testosterone in our deep sleep, all of those anabolic hormones that help us to build, and store and kind of support our body in that way, all happens while we sleep. So the sleep quality is very, very important. Additional ways in my practice that I utilize to help increase that anabolic state while we sleep is actually a pre-sleep feed. So you can actually do a pre-sleep protein shake, like a casein or a slow release protein or a whey protein before you go to bed to help also increase that muscle protein synthesis. So it does two things. If someone can't get enough calories or enough protein throughout the day, well, we say, okay, you can have a shake before you go to bed. And we see that has research to support that also increases muscle protein synthesis. But they have to be sleeping well first before we add anything in. And that's definitely just as important in the weight gain versus weight loss.
So do you use any supplementation when you're trying to get patients to have a better sleep hygiene as well?
Yeah, we do like a magnesium glycinate is a big part of the protocols, and it really depends on the person what we would prescribe, but absolutely we would add that to the protocol.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. If our listeners are looking to work with you, what would be the best way for them to get in touch?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me at Nutrichem, Nutrichem, Nutrichem in Ottawa. It's a compounding pharmacy and clinic. My Instagram is at Dr. Sophie PM. So you can always DM me on there if you have any further questions or want to book an appointment with me as well.
Fantastic. Well, again, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Supplementing Health. For more information about our guests, past shows, and future topics, please visit aor.ca/podcast or aor.us/podcast. Do you have a topic you want us to cover? We invite you to engage with us on social media to request a future topic or email us at marketing@aor.ca.